Welcome to this video on the Investigational New Drug application, or IND. Following drug discovery and preclinical testing for safety and efficacy, the IND must be submitted before proceeding to clinical trials. Our objectives are to provide an overview of the IND application content, principles, and review process. We will also identify the relevant regulatory guidance documents for IND submissions. Let's review some key terms. The sponsor is the person who applies for the new drug, which in the succeeding slides, we may know who are these sponsors. The NDA is a request for marketing approval. An NDA is filed for a drug that is either not yet available in the market or for an existing drug seeking approval for a new therapeutic use or other significant change. The ANDA is for generic drug approval. ANDA is technically the application if the generic is already available and you are testing for its counterpart, or the drug being developed is another counterpart. CDER assures that safe and effective drugs are available, while CBER is the Center of Biologics Evaluation and Research for those vaccines and biologics. In early preclinical development, the sponsor determines if a drug is reasonably safe for initial human use, meaning tested and proven that the drug does not induce harm if used in human, and shows activity warranting development. This involves collecting data to ensure minimal risk in early clinical studies. That is why in clinical phase 1 involved only small number of human, at least 20 healthy subjects. A sponsor initiates the clinical investigation and can be a pharmaceutical company, example Sanofi, AstraZeneca for the COVID vaccines in the previous years. Also known are the Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Novartis. A university, example Stanford and Harvard. A government agency, example National Institutes of Health. Or an individual acting as a sponsor investigator. An investigational new drug application must be submitted to the FDA before a new drug can be tested in humans, meaning all clinical trials cannot be done without application for IND. This process is regulated under 21 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 312. You can try searching it in your research engines. The INDA refers to a drug ready for human clinical trials, meaning again, tested to be safe and effective for human use with data from the preclinical trial. Submission of IND to the FDA is required to gain consent for these trials. Approval allows the sponsor to ship the drug across the country for testing, meaning there is possibility that a drug would be manufactured from other countries or regions, and the trial may be done in another. Therefore, a drug cannot be shipped if IND has not been approved. Key information in an IND includes the drug's name and chemical description. Of course, it is important that we have data of its chemical components that might have effect on properties of the drug. Ingredients, manufacturers, method of preparation, dosage form. Of course, it is important that we formulate the drug to a form that I would give stability. Preclinical data and information about the clinical investigators, which these investigators must have qualifications needed, and also including foreign trial data, if available. So we have different types of IND. First, the investigator IND is submitted by a physician for research, possibly proposing new uses or populations, meaning if the drug is already available in the market, yet is being applied for another therapeutic use. Another is emergency use IND, which, of course, from the word itself, emergency, allows experimental use during emergencies without prior submission, meaning during a life and death situation. And another, the treatment IND, is for promising drugs in serious conditions, mostly for conditions with no identified cure, while final trials continue. IND content requires animal pharmacology and toxicology data to ensure safety for human testing, and these data are being checked before it will be allowed to be used to human. Manufacturing details verify consistent drug batches. Consistent, of course, we want that during trial, all drugs given on day 1 should be the same in the long run until the finish of the study to gain a reliable results. Also, checking if supplies would be adequate, meaning the drug has detailed for large scale-up manufacturing, while clinical protocols and investigator information ensure qualified personnel and safe trial design, meaning that the persons involved in conducting the trials have knowledge and trainings. The IND must contain detailed study protocols, including procedures, meaning you already established a step-by-step process of your procedures, informed consent, which means that your participants have knowledge and comprehends the situation, and of course, allowed to withdraw if they change their minds. Data analysis, subject selection, like do you have criteria involved for your study? And safety monitoring, because we want that our patients would not be harmed, and these measures are critical for patient protection during the trial. A contract research organization, or CRO, can help the sponsor manage the IND submission and clinical trials, meaning this organization may help the sponsor in filing for the IND. After submission, the sponsor must wait 30 days before starting human trials. Approval is automatic after 30 days, meaning you can start even if the FDA has no response yet, unless the FDA issues a clinical hold, meaning stand by and do not proceed yet, or may shortens the waiting time. So FDA may respond with you earlier than 30 days and may start already. CDER's pre-IND consultation program fosters early communication between sponsors and new drug review divisions, meaning before the application for IND, you may consult to the CDER or CBER if biologics under the FDA. This provides guidance on the necessary data for a successful IND submission, with review divisions organized by therapeutic class. Resources for IND applications include the legal requirements, assistance from CDER, and internal IND review principles, policies, and procedures. In the FDA review process, meaning it checks all the data, preclinical, manufacturing, and even the qualifications. Then, the FDA assigns an IND number for tracking. It's like our orders in online that we can check it using the tracking numbers. The Center for Drug Evaluation and Research reviews the application, with 30 days allotted for review. If no clinical hold is issued, the sponsor can begin enrolling patients. A clinical hold stops human testing until FDA concerns are resolved. Reasons for a clinical hold include significant risk to subjects, insufficient safety procedures, unqualified investigators, or a misleading or incomplete investigator's brochure. Guidance documents represent the FDA's current thinking and provide guidelines to staff and sponsors on processing, content, evaluation, and approval of applications, as well as the design, production, manufacturing, and testing of regulated products. Of course, we have laws, regulations, policies, and procedures that we follow. The Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, collects the final regulations published in the Federal Register. The CFR is divided into 50 titles representing broad areas subject to federal regulations, meaning it's a regulation not limited to the IND. Section 21 of the CFR contains most regulations pertaining to food and drugs. The regulations document all actions of all drug sponsors that are required under federal law. Please see in the screenshot of the website. Section 21 of the CFR contains most regulations pertaining to food and drugs. These regulations document all required actions for drug sponsors under federal law, and we are in the subchapter D, which is the drugs for human use. And then under subchapter D is Part 312, which is for the Investigational New Drug application. Please also see the Part 314, also all other parts for familiarity. So, under the Part 312, another subpart B for IND, and all other subparts important in IND, meaning in preparation for clinical trial, very crucial that we follow the CFR to fully implement proper and safe protocols. 312.20 Requirement for an IND. First, a sponsor shall submit an IND to FDA if the sponsor intends to conduct a clinical investigation with an investigational new drug that is subject to applicability. Second, a sponsor shall not begin a clinical investigation until the investigation is subject to an IND, which is in effect in accordance with general requirements for use of an investigation. Third, a sponsor shall submit a separate IND for any clinical investigation involving an exception from informed consent under 50.24 of this chapter, which are the exception from informed consent requirements for emergency research. Such a clinical investigation is not permitted to proceed without the prior written authorization from FDA. FDA shall provide a written determination 30 days after FDA receives the IND, or earlier.
Okay, second, the Manual of Policies and Procedures, or MAPS, includes approved instructions for internal practices followed by CDER staff. This helps to standardize the new drug review process and other activities. All MAPs are available for the public to review for a better understanding of office policies, definitions, staff responsibilities, and procedures. To find maps of particular interest to IND sponsors, go to CDER Manual of Policies and Procedures and use INDs in the search box.
The following regulations apply to the IND application process. Please see the numbers and corresponding regulations flashed on your screen. This flowchart details the decision-making process for clinical investigators on whether an IND is required for a proposed study involving a marketed drug. So an IND may not be required if, first, the drug is already FDA approved, meaning the drug is already available in the market, and the purpose is for additional studies only of the same therapeutic use. Second, the study does not support labeling changes. Third, the study does not support major advertising changes. And lastly, the route, dose, or patient population does not significantly increase risk, meaning placebo-controlled studies may still qualify for exemption. In applying, of course, there are forms needed to be accomplished. The forms may be, first, the FDA Form 1572 is titled Forms to be Filled for INDA. Although it is not required for submission to the FDA, the information it contains must be provided to the agency. Any updates must be signed by an investigator. This image shows a portion of the FDA Form 1572, which includes the Statement of Investigator. This form contains specific safety requirements related to sections of FDA Form 1571. You may also search it on your behalf, so you could explore, and for future reference. The second required form is FDA Form 3-6-7-4. This form is used for amendments, supplements, and resubmissions under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or the Public Health Service Act. All clinical investigator must get registered with the FDA for Phase 1 study, which needs to provide all the trial information. Form 3674 requires all clinical investigators in a Phase 1 study to be registered with the FDA and to provide all trial information. So all details must be written in this form. And we also have Form FDA 1-5-7-2, the Statement of Investigator, is required for clinical trials involving investigational drugs or biologics under an IND. Its purpose is to verify that investigators are qualified and compliant with FDA regulations and good clinical practice. This schematic illustrates the IND process, starting with the sponsor and CRO applying for the IND. The application is reviewed by CDER or CBER to assess the drug's properties and safety for human use. The application is evaluated by different review divisions, including medicinal, chemistry, pharmacology/toxicology, and statistical reviewers. The main objective of the review is to assess the safety of the investigational drug before it can be tested in humans. If the submitted data show that the drug is reasonably safe, the clinical study may proceed. However, if deficiencies or safety concerns are identified, meaning possible there are lacking documents, the sponsor may be required to submit additional data or address the issues raised by the reviewers. In some cases, a clinical hold may be imposed until the concerns are resolved. Once the review is completed and no major deficiencies remain, the IND application is considered acceptable, allowing the investigational study to continue. Key sections involved in the IND form include sponsor information, drug monograph, IND/NDA/ANDA numbers, certificates, clinical trial registration numbers, and signatures of authorized personnel. This diagram summarizes the NDA process and interaction with the FDA, detailing the steps from drug discovery and development through preclinical studies to the NDA submission and review.
Thank you for watching this video on the Investigational New Drug application.